All right, so get ready, everyone, because today we are taking a deep dive into the world of Aristotelianism,
Yes.
exploring the ideas of Aristotle,
Huh.
a philosopher whose work, it just still resonates like thousands of years later.
It really does.
His philosophy, covers a lot of ground.
Yeah.
And what always strikes me is how Aristotle wasn't,
He wasn't just
just an armchair philosopher.
Yeah.
Like, he really emphasized this observation and practicality,
yes.
which might explain why, his
It's
ideas
so relevant.
still relevant today.
Absolutely. His philosophy tackles, those big questions.
Yeah.
What is real?
Right.
How do we learn?
Uh-huh.
What does it mean to live a good life?
Oh, okay.
How should societies be governed?
Yeah.
And he even delved into the natural world.
Oh, wow.
And he laid the groundwork for scientific inquiry.
So it's like a philosophical toolbox for
Yes.
understanding, well, pretty much everything.
Exactly. And that practical approach is evident right from the start with his metaphysics,
Metaphysics, okay.
which delves into the nature of reality itself.
Metaphysics sounds pretty heady.
It is.
Does this involve, like, decoding the secrets of the universe?
Well, in a way it does.
Okay.
Aristotle was all about understanding substance, the fundamental building blocks of reality.
Okay.
And he argued that everything has both matter and form.
Matter and form. Okay, help me grasp that.
Sure.
What's like a real-world example of how those two work together?
Okay, so think of something simple, like a wooden table.
Okay, a table.
The wood itself, the physical stuff, that's the matter.
Right.
But the table's designed the shape that makes it a table.
Yeah.
And not just a pile of lumber. That's the form.
Okay, I'm starting to see how those two kind of go hand in hand.
Yes.
But didn't Aristotle take this idea even further with something called the four causes?
You're right, he did.
Okay.
And he used those to explain how things come into being.
Okay.
So let's stick with our table. The material cause is the wood.
Yeah.
The formal cause is the design or the blueprint.
Okay.
And the efficient cause is the carpenter who made it.
All right.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The final cause is the table's purpose. Its reason for existing, like providing place for people to eat.
So he's saying everything from a simple table to, I don't know, like the planets in the sky has these four causes?
That was his idea.
Okay.
Everything exists for a reason, has a purpose.
Wow.
And this leads us to one of his most mind-blowing concepts, the unmoved mover.
Okay, now we're getting into like the cosmic stuff.
We are.
What's this unmoved mover all about?
Well, Aristotle believed that everything in the universe is in motion, constantly changing.
Right.
But there has to be something that set this motion in motion, an initial cause, right?
Right.
That's the unmoved mover.
So it's like the ultimate kickoff, like the force that started everything.
Exactly. It's the first cause,
Yeah.
the origin of all motion. And while Aristotle doesn't explicitly call it God, many interpret the unmoved mover as a divine being, perfect and eternal.
Whoa, that's pretty profound.
It is.
Some scholars even see parallels between the unmoved mover and modern cosmological ideas like the Big Bang,
Interesting.
exploring this concept of an initial cause for the universe.
Right.
Talk about like ahead of his time.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears a bit.
Okay.
How did Aristotle think we acquire knowledge?
That's a great transition because he had very specific views on that as well.
Okay.
Remember how he was all about observation?
Yeah.
That's where his idea of empiricism comes in.
Empiricism.
He believed that true knowledge comes from experiencing the world around us, not just thinking about it in the abstract.
Which is a stark contrast to his teacher Plato, right?
Yes, exactly.
Plato was convinced that we're born with this innate knowledge.
Right.
Like certain ideas are just hardwired into our brains.
Exactly.
But Aristotle diverged from that, arguing that we learn through observation, gathering data, and drawing conclusions based on what we see.
Yeah.
He even developed the system of logic
He did.
to help us organize our thoughts
Yes.
and ensure our arguments are sound.
That's right.
Wait a minute, are you talking about the syllogism?
The syllogism, yes.
That thing I vaguely remember from philosophy class ages ago.
Yes. The syllogism is a classic example of Aristotelian logic.
Okay.
It's like a recipe for building rock-solid arguments. Remember the famous Socrates is mortal example?
It's coming back to me now.
Okay.
Something about all men being mortal.
Precisely.
Okay.
It goes like this. All humans are mortal.
Uh-huh.
Socrates is human.
Okay.
Therefore, Socrates is mortal.
Right.
It's a method of deducing a conclusion based on two premises that are already accepted as true.
Okay, it seems deceptively simple,
It does.
but incredibly powerful.
It is.
It makes me think about how we make decisions in our own lives.
Yes.
Did Aristotle apply this kind of logical thinking to ethics?
Absolutely. This structured approach to thinking wasn't just for abstract reasoning. It was a foundation for making good choices as well.
Interesting.
For Aristotle, living a good life meant striving for eudaimonia.
Eudaimonia? That sounds intriguing.
It is.
It's not just simple happiness, is it?
You're right. It's much deeper than that.
Okay.
It's often translated as flourishing or living well.
Okay.
But it really encompasses aligning your life with your true purpose and potential.
So it's about like a sense of fulfillment.
Yes.
Of living a life that's meaningful and in harmony with who you are.
Exactly. It's about pursuing a life that's both fulfilling and virtuous.
Okay.
Which brings us to another key concept, virtue ethics.
Virtue ethics.
For Aristotle, being a good person wasn't about following a rigid set of rules.
Right.
But rather about cultivating good habits and finding a balance in all things.
Okay.
And he called this balance the golden mean.
The golden mean? Okay, I'm hooked.
All right.
What does that look like in practice?
Okay.
Give me an example.
Think about courage. Aristotle believed that true courage is finding the balance between recklessness on one end and cowardice on the other.
Okay.
It's about finding that sweet spot, that middle ground, where we act bravely, but not foolishly.
So it's not just about being fearless.
Yeah.
It's about being like smart and thoughtful about how we express our courage.
Exactly. And this principle applies to all sorts of virtues. Generosity, for example,
Generosity.
is the golden mean between being wasteful and stingy.
Oh, okay.
Honesty is the balance between being brutally frank and being deceitful. It's about finding that equilibrium point.
It's almost like a life hack for being a better person.
I like that.
But wouldn't it be tough to always hit that perfect balance?
What?
Like life can be pretty messy.
It can.
How did Aristotle think we could apply the golden mean in practical everyday situations?
That's where practical wisdom or phronesis comes in.
Phronesis. Okay.
It's the ability to make the right choices in different situations, using our judgment to apply those virtues in a way that fits the circumstances.
So it's not just about knowing what the virtues are, but also how to use them effectively.
Exactly.
It's like knowing the notes on a piano, but also needing the skill to play beautiful music.
That's a great analogy.
I can already see how this could apply to so many areas of life.
Me too.
Like imagine trying to apply the golden mean to something like social media use.
Oh, that's a good one.
Finding that balance between, oversharing and being a total hermit.
Right.
Engaging thoughtfully without getting sucked into like negativity, that's a real challenge.
It is.
But Aristotle was clearly a man of many interests.
He was.
So we can't forget about his ideas on politics.
Of course not.
After all, he practically wrote the book on it, literally.
He did. And his insights on politics are incredibly relevant even today.
I bet.
He believed that humans are inherently social creatures who naturally form communities.
Makes perfect sense. We're not exactly lone wolves out there in the wilderness. Like, we thrive in groups.
Exactly. He believed that the purpose of government was to create a society where people could flourish and reach their full potential, not just maintain order.
So it's not just about keeping the peace. It's about creating the conditions for people to live good and fulfilling lives.
Yes.
Sounds like he was laying the groundwork for a lot of modern political theory here.
He was. He also recognized the complexities of governing.
I imagine.
Saw how power could be misused.
Uh-huh.
In fact, he categorized different forms of government,
He did.
each with a good and a corruptive form.
Didn't he come up with like 3 main types?
Yes, you did.
Each with a sort of ideal version and then a version that went off the rails?
You got his framework is surprisingly relatable even today.
Okay.
First, you have rule by one person monarchy, which is the ideal, and tyranny, the corrupted form.
So it all hinges on whether that ruler is using their power for good or for selfish gain.
Exactly, a timeless dilemma, really.
Yeah.
Then you have rule by a few aristocracy, where the most virtuous and capable lead, versus oligarchy, where a small, powerful group controls everything.
Okay, those make sense. But what about rule by the many? What did he call that?
Now, this is where it gets interesting.
Okay.
Aristotle considered the ideal form a polity.
A polity.
That's a balanced system with shared power and a strong middle class for stability.
Okay.
But the corrupted form, he called that a democracy.
Wait, democracy is the bad one.
Right.
Isn't that supposed to be like the gold standard of government? At least that's what we're always taught.
That's where understanding the historical context is crucial.
Okay.
Remember, Aristotle was writing over 2,000 years ago.
Right.
His idea of democracy was more akin to what we might call mob rule today,
Mob rule.
where the masses are easily swayed by emotions and make hasty decisions without proper deliberation.
Oh, I see. So it's not about democracy itself being inherently flawed,
Right.
but more about the potential for it to go off the rails if it's not structured carefully. It's kind of like how unchecked power in any system can lead to corruption.
Precisely, Aristotle believed that the best approach was a mixed government,
Okay.
blending elements of all three types to prevent anyone from gaining too much control.
Interesting.
He also stressed the importance of a strong middle class as a moderating force in society.
Which is a topic that still resonates strongly in modern political debates.
It does.
Yeah, you don't have to look far to see those concerns about income inequality and the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few.
Right.
Aristotle was clearly tapping into some fundamental truths about human nature and the dynamics of power.
He was.
But we've covered so much ground already.
We have.
Let's not forget that Aristotle also had a lot to say about science.
You're right. He was a keen observer of the natural world.
Yeah.
And made significant contributions to the way we understand it, although some of his theories haven't stood the test of time.
Yeah, didn't he believe that the Earth was the center of the universe?
He did.
Not quite how we see things today.
True. Some of his scientific conclusions were later disproven.
Right.
But that shouldn't diminish the impact of his approach.
Okay.
He was one of the first to systematically classify living organisms,
He was.
creating a hierarchy he called the Scala Naturae, or ladder of nature.
The Scala Naturae, that rings a bell.
It does.
It was a kind of ranking of life, wasn't it?
It was.
And guess who was at the top?
Humans.
Of course.
He was basically organizing the natural world, showcasing the interconnectedness of all living things.
Okay.
And while we've refined our understanding of biological classification, since then, his idea of categorizing life based on shared traits was revolutionary.
So even though some of his specific conclusions weren't entirely accurate, his methods were incredibly groundbreaking for his time.
Absolutely. Perhaps most importantly, he championed the empirical approach to understanding the world,
The empirical approach.
stressing observation, experimentation, and evidence-based conclusions, the foundation of modern science.
It's amazing to think that so many of our modern ways of understanding the world have roots in these ancient ideas.
It is.
We've barely scratched the surface of Aristotelianism,
I agree.
but I already feel like I'm gaining a new perspective.
And we've only just begun. Next time, we'll dive into how to actually apply Aristotle's wisdom to our lives today,
Oh, I like that.
exploring his ideas on virtue decision-making and how to live a truly flourishing life.
It's like we're taking a philosophy class and a self-help seminar all rolled into one.
I like that analogy.
I can't wait to unpack more of Aristotle's insights in part 2.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Aristotle.
Yeah.
Last time we got a taste of his ideas on metaphysics, knowledge, ethics, and even politics.
We did.
It's incredible how much ground he covered.
It is truly remarkable how his philosophy touches on so many aspects of human existence.
Yeah.
And today I'm excited to delve into how these ancient ideas can actually be applied to our modern lives.
Okay, because let's be real, sometimes philosophy can feel a bit abstract and removed from like everyday life.
Yeah.
So how can we take Aristotle's wisdom and actually put it into practice?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Where do we even begin?
Well, one of the most powerful and applicable takeaways from Aristotle is his emphasis on virtue ethics.
Virtue ethics.
Remember the golden mean? That idea of finding balance between extremes?
Oh, yeah, the golden mean.
Yes.
That's about, finding that sweet spot, like being courageous but not reckless,
Right.
generous but not wasteful.
Exactly.
It's about avoiding those extremes.
Precisely. And in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with information and faced with complex decisions,
Yeah.
this concept can be incredibly helpful.
Give me an example.
Sure.
How could we use the golden mean to navigate some of the challenges we face in our modern lives,
Okay.
say in the workplace?
All right, let's say you're working on a big project.
Okay.
You could be overly ambitious, taking on too much and risking burnout.
Right.
Or you could be too cautious, playing it safe, and missing out on opportunities to grow.
The golden mean suggests finding that middle ground, being assertive and aiming high without overcommitting.
So it's about finding that balance between pushing yourself and knowing your limits, taking calculated risks without being reckless.
Exactly. And this applies to our personal lives as well.
It does.
Think about communication styles.
Okay.
You could be brutally honest all the time, which might hurt people's feelings.
Right.
Or you could always sugarcoat things,
Mm-hmm.
which could lead to misunderstandings.
Yeah.
The golden mean suggests finding a balance between honesty and kindness.
So it's about being truthful without being harsh.
Right.
being considerate without sacrificing your authenticity.
That's the idea. It's about expressing yourself genuinely while also being mindful of the impact your words have on others.
I love that it's like a roadmap for navigating all those tricky interpersonal situations we find ourselves in.
It is.
But let's be honest, sometimes it feels like we're living in a world that's pretty far from virtuous. How can we stay grounded in these principles when there's so much negativity and chaos around us?
That's a great point. It's certainly not always easy. But remember what Aristotle said about humans being social creatures
Yeah,
who thrive in communities.
right.
We don't exist in isolation.
We
The
don't.
choices we make, the virtues we embody, they ripple outward and affect those around us.
So by working on ourselves, by striving to be more virtuous, we actually have the power to make a positive impact on our communities.
Exactly. It's like a chain reaction of goodness.
Oh, wow.
When we act with courage, kindness, and integrity, it can inspire others to do the same.
That's a really empowering thought.
It is.
It means that even our small, everyday acts of virtue can make a difference.
Absolutely. It all comes back to Aristotle's concept of eudaimonia,
Eudaimonia.
that sense of flourishing and living in accordance with our purpose.
Right.
It's not just about individual happiness, it's about contributing to a greater good.
I see how it all connects.
Yes.
Virtue leads to eudaimonia, which has a positive impact on the community.
Exactly.
It's a beautiful cycle. It's making me wonder if Aristotle had any thoughts on how we could apply these principles to decision-making.
He did.
Not just on a personal level, but like in a societal context.
Absolutely. And this brings us back to his ideas about politics.
Politics.
Last time we discussed his classification of governments
Yeah.
and his preference for a mixed system, right?
Yes, the monarchy versus tyranny, aristocracy versus oligarchy, and polity versus democracy. It was fascinating.
It was.
We can actually see echoes of those systems in governments around the world today.
Exactly. But what's really relevant is his emphasis on balance and moderation.
Balance and moderation.
Regardless of the specific form of government,
Okay.
he believed that any system, even a good one, could become corrupt if it went to extremes.
So like a monarchy turning into a tyranny if the ruler becomes too power hungry?
Exactly.
Or even a democracy collapsing into mob rule if people are easily swayed by emotions or misinformation.
Precisely, which is why Aristotle advocated for a mixed government.
A mixed government.
That incorporated elements of all three types. It's like a system of checks and balances, but on a broader scale.
Checks and balances.
He believed that this would help prevent any one group from gaining too much power.
So it's about preventing those power imbalances that can lead to corruption and instability.
Yes. What about his emphasis on a strong middle class?
Yeah, that idea seems especially relevant today with all the concerns about wealth inequality.
He was very clear about the dangers of wealth being concentrated in the hands of a few.
I see.
Aristotle believed that a thriving middle class acts as a buffer between the extremes of wealth and poverty,
Okay.
fostering stability and social cohesion.
That makes so much sense. It's like he was anticipating some of the challenges we're grappling with today.
He was.
His ideas could inform modern discussions about economic justice and the fair distribution of resources.
Absolutely. Aristotle's work offers valuable insights into creating a just and stable society,
Okay.
even thousands of years after he wrote them.
This is blowing my mind. It's like we're taking these ancient philosophical ideas and connecting them to real-world issues,
We are?
from personal dilemmas to social and political challenges. But we can't wrap up our exploration of Aristotle without revisiting his thoughts on science.
You're right. While some of his specific scientific theories haven't held up over time,
Yeah.
his methodology and approach were incredibly influential.
We've already talked about how he was a keen observer of nature
Yes.
and how he pioneered the classification of living organisms.
He did.
But what else can we learn from his approach to science?
Well, his emphasis on observation classification and searching for patterns in the natural world laid the foundation for the scientific method.
Okay.
That approach based on evidence and experimentation is still the bedrock of scientific inquiry today.
I'm realizing that even though some of his conclusions were later proven incorrect, his dedication to observing the world and drawing conclusions from those observations was a huge step forward.
It was his commitment to an empirical approach, even if it didn't always lead to perfect accuracy,
Right.
was incredibly important for the development of science as we know it.
This has been such a rewarding journey so far. We've covered so much ground.
We have.
From Aristotle's core ideas to their modern applications. It's incredible how relevant his work still is today.
It really is a testament to the enduring power of his insights, but we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, I agree.
There are still layers to uncover, nuances to explore.
I can't wait to dive into those deeper layers. What else do we have in store for our final part of this Aristotelian adventure?
Next time, we'll wrap up by examining some of the criticisms and limitations of Aristotle's philosophy,
Okay.
while also looking at his lasting influence on Western thought.
Sounds fascinating. I'm ready to tackle those big questions and see how Aristotle's ideas have shaped the world we live in. Welcome back, philosophy enthusiasts.
Yeah.
We're about to wrap up our deep dive into the world of Aristotelianism. It's been quite a journey exploring, those core concepts and their surprising relevance to our modern lives.
It has, hasn't it?
But no philosophical deep dive would be complete
No, it would.
without acknowledging, some of the critiques and limitations, even for a thinker as influential as Aristotle.
Of course.
Because even the greatest minds have their blind spots, right?
They do.
So what are some of the criticisms
Yeah.
leveled at Aristotle and his ideas?
Right.
What didn't quite stand the test of time?
Well, one common critique stems from his emphasis on observation and the natural world.
Observation.
While this approach was groundbreaking,
Uh-huh.
it sometimes led him to conclusions that were later disproven by, scientific advancements.
Yeah.
We touched on this earlier with his geocentric model of the universe,
Right.
which placed the Earth at the center.
Yeah, we know now that we're not quite as cosmically central as Aristotle thought.
Exactly. But it's important to remember that he was working with the limited knowledge available at his time. What's remarkable is that his empirical approach, even with its initial inaccuracies, laid the groundwork for the scientific method,
Right.
which is all about refining our understanding as new evidence emerges.
So it's not about faulting him for not having modern telescopes and microscopes,
Oh, no.
but rather appreciating how his approach paved the way for scientific progress.
Exactly.
Were there any other criticisms of his philosophy?
Yeah, another critique is that his laser focus on logic and reason sometimes overlooked the role of emotions and intuition in human experience.
Oh, interesting.
Some argue that his emphasis on rationality can lead to a somewhat cold or impersonal view of human nature.
That's an interesting point.
It is.
It's like he was so focused on the logical structure of the universe
Right.
that he missed some of the messiness and complexity of human feelings.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder, if he fully grasped the nuances of human motivation and decision making.
That's a good point.
And his concept of virtue and the golden mean,
Right.
while a noble ideal can sometimes feel a bit rigid or idealistic, critics argue that it doesn't always account for the complexities of real-life ethical dilemmas, where there aren't always clear-cut right and wrong answers.
It's true. Life is really black and white.
Yeah.
There's so many shades of gray.
Exactly. So how do we reconcile these criticisms with the enduring value and influence of Aristotle's philosophy?
Right.
How do we take the best of what he offered while acknowledging his limitations?
That's a great question, and I think it requires a balanced perspective.
Okay.
We can appreciate Aristotle's insights into human nature ethics and the pursuit of knowledge,
Uh-huh.
while also recognizing the contexts in which his ideas were formed
Right.
and the ways in which our understanding has evolved since then.
Right.
It's about taking the essence of his wisdom and adapting it for the modern world.
It's like taking his ancient operating system and giving it a serious upgrade for the 21st century.
I like that.
We can value his emphasis on reason and virtue,
Mm-hmm.
while also recognizing the importance of emotions, intuition, and the complexities of lived experience.
Precisely, it's about integrating his wisdom into a more holistic and nuanced view of the world.
Right.
And that's how we keep his legacy alive and relevant.
Speaking of legacy, what impact did Aristotelianism have on Western thought?
Oh, huge.
It seems like his ideas were pretty far-reaching.
They were. His influence is undeniable.
I can imagine.
His work shaped everything from medieval theology to the Renaissance and the Enlightenment.
Wow.
Thinkers like Thomas Aquinas integrated Aristotle's philosophy into Christian doctrine,
Oh, wow.
and his emphasis on reason and observation was a catalyst for the scientific revolution.
So even though his name isn't always front and center,
Right.
his ideas have been woven into the very fabric of Western intellectual history.
Absolutely. To this day, his work informs discussions about ethics, politics, science, and the nature of reality.
Wow.
That's the mark of a truly enduring philosophical legacy.
It's amazing to think about how these ideas conceived thousands of years ago still have the power to shape our understanding of the world.
It is.
We've come full circle in this deep dive.
We have.
We explored the core concepts. We considered their practical applications.
Uh-huh.
We acknowledged the criticisms.
Right.
And we've seen how Aristotle's legacy continues to resonate.
It's been an incredible journey of philosophical discovery.
It has.
And despite the limitations, Aristotle's work offers timeless wisdom
Yeah.
that can enrich our lives and help us navigate the complexities of the modern world.
I couldn't agree more so as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Aristotelianism.
Yeah.
Let's leave our listeners with one final thought-provoking question to ponder.
Okay.
If Aristotle were alive today, observing our modern world with all its challenges and opportunities,
Right.
what insights would he offer?
Yeah.
What would he say about the state of humanity and the path forward?
That's something to think about.
It is until next time, keep those minds curious and never stop questioning, just like Aristotle did.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.